All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on anxiety with food allergies. I'm Kyle Dine. I'm the CEO, the founder of Equal Eats, and I am really, really happy to be joined today by Barrie Austin. Hey, Barrie, how are you today?
Great, how are you?
Really well, and really well because I think this is a topic that we're covering in a very unique way. I'm an individual with multiple food allergies. You're a mother of a daughter who has multiple food allergies. So we have a lot of different perspectives on this issue, and we also really want to hear from our audience today. Your questions, your participation, anything you want to bring into the conversation, please feel free to put it in the chat, and we'll have some time at the end to address as much as possible. But this is a big topic, and it's one that I personally feel very strongly about, that I've dealt with quite a bit over my lifetime with allergies. And the goals today are really trying to normalize this complex topic that sometimes might be taboo, but we really just want to bring it out into the open, acknowledge some of the realities of anxiety that many of us face, provide support. This is something that it can be very heavy and weighs on us. And overall provide some practical tips from both perspectives, and hopefully more. And important to note, I am not a doctor. So there is no medical advice. This is really just providing some practical personal tips and strategies. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Barrie Austin, who was a New York City school teacher, has her master's in education. Um, but as you can see here, a mother of an incredible person that I know. She's one of the Equal Eats ambassadors, Kelsey Austin. So Barrie, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey with allergies and anxiety.
Um, as you as you mentioned, I was a New York City school teacher, and my daughter Kelsey, who's my younger daughter, my older daughter is Michael, has also some allergies, but they're not as difficult to handle as Kelsey's. And I wound up not being able to go back to work after she was diagnosed at 2.5 because things were just it was rough. It was really difficult to know what was safe, and it was very anxiety producing. I started training in Tai Chi and Qigong about a year after that, and so I've been teaching for the last 20 years. I also do volunteer counseling work at a local organization that provides counseling to people that could otherwise not afford it. And I love traveling and outdoorsy activities and hiking and spending time with my family.
Wonderful. Some great pictures there. You look like a very active hiker. I want to get out there soon. And then just to quickly introduce myself as well, I wear multiple hats alongside running Equal Eats. I'm a food allergy educator. I go into schools across North America doing big food allergy awareness assemblies for kids. I'm a father, husband. A couple of these pictures here, I love to travel. That's me in the bottom right, giving my allergy spiel at a restaurant, doing my inquisition. But overall, I've managed allergies to peanuts, tree nuts, egg, fish, shellfish, and mustard since I was about 1 or 2 years old. So most of my lifetime, my journey with allergies went from parents really helping me, safeguard me, to cavalier teenager who took a lot of risks, to someone who had a very severe life-threatening reaction, and just very lucky to be here, to a very alert adult at this point that dabbles and deals with anxiety here, there, and everywhere. So I'll be sharing some of my experiences as well too. In terms of this overall topic, um, we're going to chat about it from a bunch of different angles, but I think it's really important to acknowledge that it's different across all of us. Um, is that fair to say, Barrie?
There's a huge range, but it doesn't mean that the impact on us is not the same.
Absolutely. And there's studies that have been done in terms of quality of life, whether it's one allergy versus more. But the fact is, if one person's feeling this, it's valid and it's important. Reaction history can absolutely have play a role if you've seen anaphylaxis before. But even if you haven't, there's, you know what it is. We read the news. Our doctors have told us what it's about. So just to preface by, letting everybody know, wherever you are at in your journey, it's okay to have anxiety. It's okay to have to feel these things. And today is just acknowledging them and helping provide some strategies to help push through and um, help our kids that have allergies grow up empowered and safe. Barry, you heard the news yesterday um, in terms of a very tragic reaction that happened in Florida. How are you doing?
Um, Thank you for asking. I am really not doing great about it. I have to say, I was devastated to the point of I was in tears. Disney has always been the platinum standard of being able to go, and although you were paying a great deal for it, you were able to have a normal experience with your family. And I- I'm speechless. I don't even, I have no words. I keep thinking that maybe something is going to come out, that there was some other cross-contamination issue in the park. Um, but I'm devastated. How about you?
Yeah, I'm very similar. I'm always looking for more information, and I have my own personal tendency as someone that I feel this news. It hits me hard every time I hear about a fatality. Um, it reminds me of my mortality, to be honest, every time I hear about it, and it sets me back about two steps, and then it takes me a bit to get to where I was. So absolutely, I'm reeling from it. I honestly can't read too much about it. Personally, I just kind of a headlines and then a paragraph or two, and then I really need to check out, and then I revisit. So I'm not there yet where I'm going to revisit because I'm just personally not ready. Um, but I do get the facts, and overall, this is a theme that we've seen time and time again of incidents happening at food service establishments wherever it is. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of this. But it is, I think, really important for all of us that whether it was this news that just came out or any news in the last while, uh, we feel this. We feel this as individuals, we feel this as parents, and that's absolutely normal. And how you deal with that, how you process that, how you move on from that can be different and takes time. Um, and anybody that's watching, you're more than welcome to share your thoughts, your feelings, how you're doing with it all as well. But Barry, how do you think you're going to move onwards from news like this when we hear about someone dying?
Well, I mean, we've been living with this for 25 years. So, and my daughter's very independent. She knows that we kind of made decisions a long time ago about there were things that we weren't doing. It didn't matter that everyone was doing them. And for those of you that do know my daughter and follow her, she's very, very courageous, and she certainly has not let any grass grow under her feet. But in terms of dining out in restaurants that are allergy safe, we're kind of rough, so we'll make sure that we call when it's not prime time. Um, Again, it's Disney. So for me, that was just, it was the vacations that we would go on that I could feel as a parent that I could relax and know that my daughter was taken care of. But I'm also not familiar. Is that restaurant in the park? We used to do breakfast where I knew in the hotel, and we did the same thing, and we would do dinners in the same place, so that we usually with the same servers, so that we set up that pattern. And I don't know that I'm going to be changing that. I don't know that we ever had lunch in the park because there were too many touch points for me. So it was just something that was not in my realm of what I could tolerate. And there was a lot that I could tolerate. So I don't know that it's going to change my feeling in the park, but I'm just, as you were saying, I'm just reminded of the fragile nature of us as human beings.
Yeah, and I feel the same. For me, it's going to take some time, as I said before, to move past this. But I fully expect myself to get back to regular, despite hearing news like this. And it does impact me, and I have ever since I was 11, 12 years old. My mom was the one that clipped out the newspaper articles about fatalities, and she'd put them in front of me, and we'd have really difficult conversations about my allergies in my life. And these all just stack. All of these stories, they weigh on me over all these years, and I wouldn't say they weigh on me to the point where I won't dine out. um, but I won't be dining out right away. Right now, this is fresh, but I will rally myself and get to the point where I'll be back to normal. And it's the control factors that I think my parents empowered in me, in terms of the non-negotiables of having my epinephrine with me at all times, asking the questions, always got the medical alert necklace on. All of these things that, even though we hear details of these stories where best practices were followed, I still have this gut feeling that I'm going to be okay. I will be fine. I do everything that I've been taught and I know, and that will get me through situations. So that's sometimes maybe why I might have a little bit of uh, inability to read the whole article, because maybe there's something in there I just don't want to acknowledge, in terms of everything being right, in terms of best practices, because that is the thing that leaves me confident.
Well, perhaps also you're acknowledging to yourself that we hear negative things in the news all the time, not just related to food allergies, and there are fatalities all the time. And it's a matter of, as you would say, finding balance of how we live our lives, what messages we're imparting to our children. And so it was important. Your mother clearly did that to you. I clearly did that to Kelsey, that I made her feel very empowered. She's very clear about what her protocol is. And we are not going to live in fear. And I would say that from when she was diagnosed, what are we doing? My husband and I sat down and said, how are we going to handle this? This was very overwhelming. It was dairy, all nuts, wheat, shellfish, soy. Um, it was overwhelming, especially with a toddler. And to be in a place where we both said, we cannot live in fear all the time. And that's a decision. And I think that sometimes people don't talk about it. So when you just said you put it down, and you feel that you're going to be okay, I've always felt that we will be okay, that she will learn. And that's the whole thing that I think sometimes when I'm seeing on social media is that parents are not realizing that they're teaching their kids in terms of how they react. Back when children are trying a new behavior, and I forget which psychologist said this, but the child will turn to their caregiver for acknowledgement before they start on a new behavior. And if the caregiver expresses anxiety, that's going to convey directly to the child. If the caregiver encourages them and says, yes, you're going to be okay, you got this, then the child will go on into the world. And that's how our kids learn. So what you said, what you embody was your mom saying, you got this. It was me saying to Kelsey, you got this, even though inside sometimes I didn't want to say that. And I'm
Yeah.
sure your mother had her moments.
Absolutely. And I think, for anybody, like my daughter does not have a food allergy. She's 8. And I remember a flight where we had some of the worst turbulence I've ever seen in my life. And, she looks at me, being one of her first flights. It's like, is this okay? And I, had to put on of course, this is great. This is totally normal. Don't worry about it. And then it was fine, versus that moment of, do I show how freaking out I am on this plane? And she's fine with turbulence ever since, whether that's from that or not. But there is something learned,
Exactly.
through our own reactions as parents, for sure.
Right. I remember when I was in the classroom, if we needed information, a student would ask something and I would say, you know what? let's figure it out. Let's look it up. How are we going to solve this? And so that's how I handled reactions with Kelsey, that she'd say to me how she was feeling, and we'd be able to discuss it and go, well, so that way it was normalized,
That's
that we were able to have a conversation about it without me getting hysterical. Now inside, maybe sometimes I was kind of, you know, but I never let her feel that. And then we would talk about, so what do you think you need right now? So that was how that journey went.
such a healthy approach. Thanks for the messages in the chat, Samantha. You're feeling the same way. I appreciate it so much, and I hope that you get past this as well, and as well as yeah, some great comments there. Thank you. In terms of what brings out anxiety, obviously this is different for everybody, but for you, Barry, are there certain triggers or certain situations that you feel heightened from?
Um, yes, and we fly very often, but for me, it's still getting on a plane for a long flight. We recently flew to Japan and it was a nonstop flight for a lot of hours. And we always bring a lot of EpiPens. So on this trip, we probably had between 8 and 10. Some of them were just expired that we bring anyway. We save them for the very, very end for an emergency. But that, just doing the math of that, is very anxiety provoking for me. Now, we happen to fly JetBlue and they don't do nuts. And they allow us to board early. And it was new equipment, so the plane was clean. But for me, and we wipe everything down, that, it's the information of, we are going to be in the air for a long time. However, now the world is a different place. The first time we took the kids on a plane to go transatlantic was Kelsey was probably 10, so it was in 2005. And it was American. And it was when they were still had peanuts on the plane. And I called up to ask if they could possibly not have peanuts on that flight.
Mhm.
And they told me no. And here it was, we had this, it was not good. So that's usually for me, and I don't know whether it is from that first flight, that it comes up for me every time we get on a plane. I don't share it with Kelsey. She, though, gets it, and I know that she's shared this in various roundtables. She doesn't eat on the plane. She has her own water bottle.
Mhm.
She washes she's very meticulous about what she does on the plane. And she says it is not worth it for me. And flight to Japan was a long flight. Now, we brought food to the airport. We believe in a lot of snacks always, but she won't eat on the airplane because of that. And we wipe everything down. So for me, it's still a trigger. What about you?
All of these little pictures give me a little something, but I think the overarching thing for me that brings out anxiety is when I take a shortcut, when I don't do things by the book that I know I should have. We have these regulations we need to live with every day, with bringing your epi with you and communicating well. And if I ever take a shortcut and then I'm second guessing, this is usually
But
the common.
what does the shortcut look like?
Shortcut could be me not giving as intense of a spiel about my allergies at a restaurant, me going on a plane with a different approach, not informing the airline crew, things where I'm just, I'm going to try something out. I'm not going to always do things the same. I'm just inconsistent. And I remember one instance where I went to a restaurant and I didn't do my regular thing with explaining my allergies. I just assumed. I made too many assumptions. Everything seemed okay, and then I choked on some like Coke, some soda. It just went down the wrong pipe, and it just brought out these feelings of like, is this just a weird feeling in my throat, or is this a reaction? And this layered and layered into a point where it was my first full-blown panic attack. And the panic attack itself felt so similar to an allergic reaction, where the hard to breathe, and I just worked myself up into this different state. And I remember just having my EpiPen ready, and just like wonder, is this panic? Is this reaction? Was it just Coca-Cola? Was it something else? And then coming right back to the, I didn't do enough. I didn't do enough. And that was my first real cycle of panic and anxiety. But it does come, it helps me self-fulfill that I do need to be vigilant, because I remember that time when I really let my guard down. So it's across a lot of these different areas, but I think for anybody that's joining us for today, whether it's airplanes or sending your kid away to a party where they're being on their own, being with relatives without your direct supervision, all of these things, even just the workplace, dining out, there's all situations have their own forms of stresses, and they're all absolutely normal. Um, Pardis, thank you for your note. You relate to anxiety on long flights as well. Yeah, same rituals to keep safe. Wonderful, thank you. And Cataline, I love your comment as well. Forever grateful for my mom, who was so supportive and encouraged my independence with my celiac diagnosis as a teenager. And Barry, I almost want to say thank you in terms of what you had to bear, in terms of some of the anxieties that you had to take on that you did not pass directly on to Kelsey. Were you cognizant of that? I, I'm going to take all this on. Was that ever on your mind?
Very much so. I'm getting very emotional now when you said that, very much so. Um, Having a child with food allergies can be terrifying at times and debilitating. And there are times that it borders on depression in terms of not being able to function. The kind of dissonant noise of parties or family get-togethers when you're trying to always explain and make sure that everything was going to be an optimum situation. It's not going to be perfect, but you're trying to reach that place. What I learned was, if I was able to center myself and calm myself as I was asking for people for what we needed, then they were much more likely to help me if I could control my own anxiety, at least the response that I was behaving as though I was very calm. So when I called restaurants, or when I was calling a friend who was having a birthday party for their kid, and Kelsey never slept over anywhere. I would pick her up and bring her home. There was one sleepover, it didn't go well. And I said, you know what, I'll pick you up at the end of the night. There were certain limits that we had about what was going to be acceptable for us. But even now, when I call restaurants, I need their help.
Yeah.
And if I come at them guns a-blazing of, my daughter's going to die unless you do this, they're going to say, you know what, this is not the place for you. So part of it was, I needed to present in this very calm, I got this manner to deal with my daughter and the rest of the family, and to also be able to ask for help when I needed it from the people from the school, from classmates, from her teammates, from college, from, continuing on.
It's so interesting, not to make this about Equal Eats cards at all, but when we started researching what needs to be on communication tools to tell a very serious message to food service staff, when we started interviewing chefs and managers and waiters and waitresses, we had a lot of different messages, and the consistent feedback we got was, this needs to be black and white. This just needs to be about what you can't eat and the condition, without any personal loaded messaging that brings out anxiety in our staff, where we feel we can't help, or we're scared to help. So very, very insightful in terms of just that conveying of a message in a calm way. But that leads me to the question, Barry, how do you find this calm place. It's so hard to do from a place of what what helps you get to this place of zen and I can just focus and give a coherent message across to someone?
That's a really good question, and it made me think about it. When the kids were really little, I would go and take a dance class once a week. That my husband gave the kids dinner, I would prepare the kids dinner, and I would disappear to go to a dance class just for me. That I tried very hard not to lose myself in my daughter's diagnosis. So for us, that was the deal. I had tried to go back to work, and then the babysitter, there was a malaccurrence, and Kelsey had a reaction. And I finally, my husband and I talked, and we said, this is silly. I can't. But I didn't want to lose myself. I didn't want to be just that. I didn't want to live in that role constantly. And so I tried to keep myself. Then I started studying Tai Chi and Qigong. Then I started teaching it. Sometimes what I like to do is I put on my headphones and I go for a really long walk. And I am prone to now reading, and I call them beach reads because they're kind of trashy. They're not, they're not literature. And I walk and I listen to these stories, and I'm just, I get to forget for a little while. And just the feeling of my feet on the ground and being able to notice what's going on around me and to spend some time with myself really helps me a lot. I also love cooking. So, that's kind of her allergies have necessitated that. And even though she's not living at home now, I still love cooking. So I would say those things. What
Nice.
about you?
For me, it's really music, music, music really helps, and sports. I find anything that can really take my mind somewhere else and refocus and reframe. But music, especially songwriting, really helps me. Some people journal, and it's funny with me in songwriting, like people journal and they keep it to themselves, and people assume if you write songs, they're meant for the world. Why aren't you singing your songs? I love keeping my songs to myself, and I have them almost like a documentary of my life and feelings. I know how I felt at 22 versus 28, and that's for me, just like a journal is for people. So I just do it with melody and a guitar. So I find that really helps in anything active, getting out back to nature. Um, but I do find just getting back out, sometimes takes a few days for me to, if I am affected, to go back to a restaurant if I have a negative experience. But it's empowering for me to conquer that, to do it and get back on the horse and say, I'm not going to be defined. I'm not going to let this slow my life down and limit my opportunities. Thanks, Karina, for saying your coping strategy. What's helped is a fiction book. You get lost in a story, it
Mhm.
helps you relax. Wonderful. And walking your dog Pepper, great name, in the countryside. Samantha, working out on your Peloton helps me a lot. Oh, wow. You just sweat it right out. I love it. Great job. Karen says, honestly, things like this that remind me other people with similar moments, reactions, and I'm not overreacting. Other people just aren't aware yet of the severity of allergies or how life altering they can be. Yeah, we get you. And if this is helpful, just hearing from others, then I'm really glad that you came today, and I'm glad that we put this together. And thank you, parties, for putting meditation. I know this is an area of your specialty. Maybe as we right before we wrap up here, could could you talk a little bit more about all of the tactics and strategies you've used on that side of things? You've got some very neat uh, hobbies, and maybe you could explain a little bit more.
Um, well, for me, I got into Tai Chi. Um, doesn't really matter. It's a Chinese martial art. I had studied martial arts when I was in college, and I thought it was going to be more like dancing. And I didn't realize that it was fusing the philosophy of yin and yang with breath work, with this movement, with martial arts. And then later I got to play with weapons. So I was a very happy person to have swords and staffs and stuff like that.
Cool.
So for me, it was the fact that, and I think that everyone is talking about um, activities that are complicated, that when you're following a class in Peloton and you're writing music, that there's a lot of parts that are moving at the same time. And then you get to activate your wisdom mind when you're allowing the monkey mind to constantly play with something. And that allows us to really be held by the universe. I think that, Kyle, that you were referring to that, this feeling, this sense that you're going to be okay.
Mhm.
There are some things, and maybe if we have time later, I will do it with clients sometimes when I'm in session and they're freaking out about something. And it's very grounding. I think that sometimes people don't take the time for themselves to ground themselves. They'll put their arms around their children, they'll put their arms around a spouse, they'll put their arms around someone else who's suffering. But many times we can't do that for ourselves. So sometimes I'll say, imagine yourself sitting in a quilt made by and it's usually the women of your ancestors who you've never met. Imagine if they knew that they were going to be able to wrap their love around you, and what that would feel like. And to know that you are loved, and to know that you are enough, and to know that you're important, and to know that it's going to be okay. So I find it's the complicated thoughts that allow you to just find that wisdom mind. And it can take on many, many phases.
And it can take on many years to find what's that sweet spot for everybody. So, don't if you haven't found it yet, don't stop. Maybe try picking up a guitar, tai chi, pottery, whatever, a book. Keep trying things and trying to find what really does help you. Um, I do want to leave just with a couple other resources. I know FAIR has a whole section devoted to mental health and food allergies, so definitely check that out. It's all with a food allergy spin. My friend Tamara Hubbard runs the Food Allergy Counselor Service, which provides a whole network of counselors that can provide even more support on this topic. Barry and I come from a place of personal, where we've felt this as a parent, as an individual. So we're glad that you could join us today, and hopefully you got some tips, strategies, and if nothing else, some normalization that you're not the only one feeling these feelings. That this is very, very common in the world of severe food allergies. I do want to thank Barry for this conversation. To be honest with you, this is one of my favorite conversations on anything in terms of any webinar, any topic of food allergy. I've really enjoyed this in terms of just being open and fresh with each other. So thank you. Really, really
And
appreciate
thank
it.
you for having me, and to be able to connect with everybody and to normalize this. I think that sometimes social media makes us feel like, we got this and we're fine. And, that there's something wrong with me, that I'm kind of spinning out sometimes.
Yes, I hear you for sure. I gotta shut that down sometimes, and that's usually when the guitar comes out when I've seen too
That's
much.
amazing.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Barry, and wishing you all the best with all that you're doing, all the help that you're providing the community, and the amazing parenting that you're providing. Kelsey, I just love watching her travels. She is the epitome of a very confident young person with food allergies, not letting them slow her down. So amazing job, the
Yeah,
OG.
she's done now. She's good. She's done. That ship has sailed.
You have given her a lot of gifts to get to where she's at. So kudos, kudos. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining, and looking forward to more webinars, roundtables in the future on a whole range of topics. Until then, thanks and take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.